Hello and welcome to Gene Keys with Monifa and the transits. So we are doing our new moon in Aries transit, this wonderful second half of the eclipse that we're getting with the gate of 17 and the Gene Key 17, which is the shadow of opinion, the gift of farsightedness, and the city of omniscience. So that's pretty cool, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about omniscience this time around. What's so fun about this is that it is having this amazing slingshot energy. So not only do we have like the amplified energy of eclipse energy, which lasts from 3 months before to 3 months after in this wave of energy, but we also have this amplified opposition to Uranus because and it's right there and it has these other energies that are just directing this bing, bang, 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 bang between the Aries and the Uranus and Taurus. Um, did I say Uranus and Taurus? I did. Did I have it wrong? Let me double check. Oh, I see what I'm saying. So yeah, so that energy is actually coming from a strong energy for what we are up to in our world view. How are we looking at the world at this time? I'm thinking of that as a translation of the MC. So I wouldn't quote me on that because I'm not the perfect person to talk about the midheaven, but it is a reflected energy back into Uranus. So it's not from the new moon itself, it's from the point of midheaven in the chart. So that is causing a sense of disruption in how we see ourselves impacting the world, right? It's this feeling of there's something's going to change and it's going to change significantly in a way that we never thought it would because that Taurus energy is that long lasting energy. Okay. And then it has also these reflections coming from Venus and Mercury that are in retrograde and Neptune saying, let's think about this a little bit more. How do we think? How are we communicating from our higher self, from our spiritual purpose, right? And what are we valuing still in that regard? And what is the elevated version? How does that play out over time? So it's a beautiful time to be thinking about what is our opinion, what is our feeling of farsightedness, and what allows us to tap into our omniscience, and how that where that lands in your chart, it really does play a significant role in how you're moving forward over, I would say, a long time, because this is a energy. Anytime there's like kind of a highlighted energy like this that doesn't happen often, it's something to know that it's going to impact you for a while. That lesson's going to last for a while into the future, right? This can be a significant portion of your life, this influences. So just so you know, the chapter title in the Gene Keys is The Eye. So it's literally talking about the third eye, and the shadow is the immediate reflection at the beginning of the chapter is shadow is closing the third eye. Okay. So this idea that we're not being reflected by the universal consciousness, which is omniscience, which is that godlike feature of omniscience, right? How is that even possible? And we look at that third level: opinion, farsightedness, omniscience is the city, SIDDHI. It gives us this glimpse of what it looks like in the totality of the energy if we're applying it to everybody, or if everybody is applying it. And it's this sense of having a vision of the entire possibility of the possibilities that are all of us and unified all at once, right? One focus of spirit seeing all things. And so this does happen in glimpses. So you know, psychics, people who tap into Akashic records, all of these things are playing into this, being able to tap into whatever point that you want to be seeing, right? And then just downloading the information from that frequency. So it's a real thing. It may not be as great as an almighty omniscience, but it does happen to us humans, right? When we get tapped in on that level. So what happens in the shadow when it goes wrong, when it's going not as well as we want, is that we turn that ability to look at an idea or something that's happening with somebody or a circumstance and decide that it's wrong or flawed. And that comes from whatever we learned in our childhood, that we believe that the systems should work a certain way by however it made us feel safe, or um, our parents or whoever was teaching us created safety for us, right? And so once that's locked in, it becomes a judgment on how other people should do things. So this can go from anywhere from how you wash the dishes, which is why people have a hard time getting it together if they were trained differently as a family when they're living in the same space, or like as big as how are we paying for rent even, right? Like there are systems to these things, the ways that we were taught to think of these things, the importance of these things, what comes first, what comes second in that budget sort of things that are framed by our identity that starts in our 0 to 7 years, right? So it becomes a fear or unconscious anger around something that may be threatening what we know keeps us alive. So that opinion is holding on to the things that we think are going to save us. And so it can, if you hold to onto opinion strong enough, it becomes conflict, becomes a war, right? Because now you got to defend it for you to live, because that's what you expect from life. And if you don't have that, you don't know if you have life. That's like if we haven't experienced those new things on the other side of that opinion, then we might feel like we're gonna die, and so we have to defend ourselves to death. Somebody gonna die, that kind of feeling. All right. So the nature of this, the me, like it's supposed to be just about logic, our human ability to use the left hemisphere of our brain and bring in ideas and thoughts around of the things that we see around us, and decide to judge where they go, where they are partitioned out to. This is something that well, they say only humans do. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't see how that's possible. I believe there must be some animals that have a sense of this idea of organizing information, right? If only to like know what they're supposed to eat and not eat, right? I don't know. Anyways, but that's the idea they're telling me is that it's a mostly human thing, logic and bringing things to a conclusion. But yeah, and then but it helps us organize information. So it's actually, that's the nature of it. It's supposed to be a good thing. But when it's in the shadow, it may play out a little differently. It might play out differently because it's being reflected in that programming partner of judgment. And the judgment in the programming partner 18 is the shadow. So it's this way of saying, oh, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. That doesn't go there. We need to do that over there. And that isn't like it, right? There's that idea that you have a better idea of how things should go, right? And so the gift there is integrity. So in order to be integrity, you have to be able to see a holistic truth. And so that's the reflection that's coming from our programming partner to become this amazing omniscience. So when we can see beyond the duality, we get to live into our gift here of farsightedness. So yeah, so we talked about how this can be something that be moving to the point of war if you feel like you have to defend the truth of your opinion in order for you or your family or country to survive, right? There's a quote here that I want to talk about how this creates a pattern in the dynamic of this energy, which is from the Gene Keys. Your mind believes that in finding a fixed view or philosophy, fear can be held in check and life will be under control. So it's a way of controlling your safety, right? And it's built to help us build a better world, just help us to see, oh, that could be a little bit different. And then more people would be fed or have joy or whatever. So it's meant to see the up leveling or the bridging of the gap that can happen when something's just a little off, right? So that it can secure really the whole, meaning the whole, the person, or the whole, the community, all of the things, right? And so in that genius, it has this ability to see the little pieces that put everything together as a whole picture. So not just the holistic point of view above the all, it's being able to see why the duality is playing out and how it's creating a pattern, and then how it can be transcended, or how the pattern will evolve into another flawed integration, right? So like it just comes in a different form. It may change, but it may just still be in a dual pattern, which just keeps repeating itself, right? And so what we one of the things that he says in the book is logic defeats itself at the next level, which I love, because it's basically the concept of from Einstein, which is that you cannot solve a problem at the level of which the problem was created, a level of thinking at which the problem was created. Don't quote me on that, it's a paraphrase. So and it's the truth, right? So you have to see, and what Richard Rudd is saying here is that if you can see the duality, then you can see the perspective that is beyond the opposition. Then you're in that higher knowingness of farsightedness. And so what happens is now you can see the patterns within the patterns. You can see how that pattern got to where that pattern began and where it was going from there. In Karen Curry Parker's Quantum Human Design translation, she calls this anticipation, because this is the time of the growth of 0 to 7 years that helps us to understand how things play out over time, cycles and patterns, right? And it helps us to know when to activate certain things, or to initiate action, or to have a conversation. And if we are out of sync based on a traumatized pattern of trying to avoid a previous trauma or pain, then it'll start growing into that duality again, out of defense, of self-defense, to protect, right? And so when we see this in each other, we are really seeing that wanting to win the argument regardless of the cost, even it means like we are no longer close, and you love that, you love me, but you're still willing to hold on to your opinion at the cost of us feeling close, right? Um, and so that is part of it. Like if you, that, I guess that's more of a relationship piece. If it's within yourself, this is what people call your blind spot or cognitive dissonance. This is where people have that feeling that I know this and I do believe this, but I still am not allowing myself to act on that because of some other belief I held about what it means to be alive, what it means to stay alive, right? And so that can happen for ourselves. So we become blind to our own thoughts, trauma patterns because of the same thing, right? And then in the group dynamic, it can look like pitting one group against the other based on an opinion instead of a higher concept, right? So you can have a really cohesive family or group or team if you are if you are working together to solve a problem. But if you pick like one has one side of the problem, one has the other viewpoint of the problem, and then you kind of pit them against each other, then they will fracture. They will like be like, no, this is the only right way. No, this is the only right way. And they might think that the company will fail if they can't get the other people to agree with their opinion. But the role of leadership is to say, oh no, guys, like that's just the two sides of the argument. Or actually, this is the vision that brings all of that together. Farsightedness, right? So if you've ever experienced that in your own life, this can look like in the repressive side being self-critical and constantly comparing yourselves to others. So when people are doing this, they criticize themselves and make themselves so small in their own minds, they have no sense of self, right? They can't really look and tell you what their favorite thing is. They can't really tell you whether they like something or not, right? And it's and what happens as a result, the pattern becomes a pattern where they are constantly looking for evidence of proof that their life has less value, if not less or little value, if not for themselves, but to the society at large. They're always looking for that, and they will nitpick news and everything to prove that they are the victims of the viewpoint of society, right? Or they'll find those ideas of why they cannot do the thing they really want to do, right? The reactive side looks like opinionated, and it requires defense to uphold. This is from the Gene Keys book as well. And the quote says, "This shadow has great appeal to the male population, in particular, since the male brain naturally favors the rational approach. These people use logic as a means to enforce their opinions and views in the world, thereby making others essentially wrong." And I see this a lot, this kind of logical linear thinking of, especially the smarter the person is, the better they are at it, right? Of convincing people of their opinion. And if you don't go along with it, they get angry. They'll get angry, and they don't even know why they're angry. They just do. They just are, right? Um, and it's really important. It's really important to these people that you really believe the other side of the argument is wrong, because that way, especially if they care about you, then you can all survive. Or in the other version, it's they can convince enough people, then the system will survive, or the family will survive, or the organization will survive, or the country will survive, right? So they hold on to these things strongly. All right, so how are we thinking about this according to business? Weird, right? Like, how I always have something on marketing? I do not have anything on marketing this time. Another weird situation. um, this time we're going to start with management. So what I was able to pull down from my little frequency is that being able to see the big picture that includes the perspective and experience of the full team is the management department's job. So remember that as a small business or as a solopreneur, we wear all of these hats. So when we're thinking about the team, we are thinking about our potential team in the future, so we're not doing everything ourselves for the rest of our lives, and or the team that is actually at hand, which could be your apps, it can be your applications, it can be AI, which we were talking about earlier, right? It can be a lot of different things, and if we're not able to see how each of our apps or our systems or our products even are playing a role in the health of our business, then we are probably losing the pulse on what will allow the business to grow and thrive. Okay. And so, especially when it comes down to actual team members and our human resources, right? So we're not talking about human resources this time. I decided to skip that in favor of the management piece. But the next piece I wanted to talk about is the fulfillment or the customer service for the people that are receiving your goods and services. And this is being able to see the patterns of the ideal customer and meet and support them in fulfilling ways. So this is something where I think it really is valuable to be able to see past just the opinion of what is potentially wrong or always going to be off of, the downside. Everybody has a downside. Every personality does, and our ideal customer template has a downside. Trust, okay? So it's so it's always there, that sense of humanity being flawed. So we have to transcend that shadowing thought and what makes that an opposition of what makes it wrong, right? Why we feel like it's flawed, if there's that's a softer way to say it, right? And why we feel like that way of being is flawed, and what problems and patterns does that way of being create from our customers, and be able to meet them in that gap before they have been fully transformed by your work and information, hopefully, or product, however you want to do that. So by filling that gap, they are supported until they are able to support themselves, right? Or you might even find a way of collaborating with other businesses so that they can have that support if you don't provide that service specifically, right? That you know that they're going to also need just because of their patterns, right? Pretty cool way to see into the future on how you can be competitive in a market, right? The other way was being competitive in the market is largely assisted in companies by your research and development or your education. What are you learning? So this is about having an idea of where the market is going and seeing how your trajectory of what you offer and how you're implementing it, how it can maximize on where the whole of the market is going. And it also can it tell you like what do you need to learn next? It may be something like if you know that in research and development how AI is impacting your market, then you can be like, okay, like maybe next thing I need to learn is about some AI, right? Maybe that becomes the research and development plan for your company of one, or um, and if you do have a research and development team, you know, play on, sisters, right? Play on, and then you can also direct that team to start looking in the places in the corners that the market's eventually going to converge upon your service or product, right? So those are my ideas of how to really get the most out of this. Remember, this eclipse energy is 3 months before, 3 months after. 6 months is a long time. How is the next or this 6 month period impacting who you are and what you're doing in your business or in your company for the next odd years? How long you plan on being there? And how do you want to be supported in that? This is the time to think about it because this is about supporting our higher consciousness, supporting our ability to tap in to the things that are beyond ourselves and our duality and our viewpoint, right? So I hope that helps, and I will see you on the next video.